Hello, good day. The title of our investigation experiment is Visual Learning versus Auditory Learning, Effective Learning Method on Memory Recall Performance, which aims to determine the difference between visual and auditory learning memory recall tests and identify the most effective learning method for memory recall performance. The independent variables are visual learning and auditory learning, while the dependent variables are numerical performance in visual learning and numerical performance in auditory learning. The statement of the problem of this experiment is: does visual learning produce higher memory recall test scores than auditory learning? And the alternative directional hypothesis is visual learning produces higher memory recall test scores than auditory learning. That this design, our design in our experiment is quasi-experimental post-test design, which there is only one group. The experimental group, there is no perfect. The experimental exposes the subjects to the treatment, manipulation, or intervention, then immediately analyzes the result. And we use purposive sampling in gathering the participants where the experimenters have pre-established criteria and identify the participants. The technique is to an individual or cluster of participants. So the experimenters use a purposive sampling technique for the gathering of subjects. The experimenter will gather 20 participants who are willing to participate in the experiment. So participants must be 18 years old and above. And mostly participants must be Bachelor of Arts major in psychology college students in University of Cebu main campus. And participants must not have any hearing or visual impairment. And participants must be wholehearted, willing to participate in the experiment. And then next is the instrument used are two short stories. First is the Tree Sun and a Bundle of Sticks by Jacob Goal for the visual memory recall test. And for the auditory memory recall test, you have the Hidden Treasure by Enid Blyton. And our investigation research is that the statistical tool was the Wilcoxon-Steinrag test. So the Wilcoxon-Steinrag test compares differences between one group with two independent treatments when the independent variable is an ordinal with an alpha level of 0.05. So the number of test items the experimenters gave was 10 each, both from the visual memory recall test and the auditory memory recall test. Or therefore, the hypothesis should be one-tailed, since experimenters used an alternative directional hypothesis. And the result of this experiment was to accept the alternative directional hypothesis since the p-value is 0.00012, which is less than 0.05. Therefore, the result of this is significant that the visual learning produces higher memory recall test scores than auditory learning. So the average score of the visual memory recall test is 19, which is higher than the average score of the auditory memory recall test, which is 13. Thus, the visual learning method is a more effective method than the auditory learning method in memory recall performance.